Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about how we got Dungeons and Dragons wrong for 50 years and how the next 50 years is about getting it right. And specifically today, I want to talk about processing what happens at the Dungeons and Dragons table intellectually, and fully. Okay, today we're just going to talk about processing what happens at the Dungeons and Dragons table intellectually, but uh, but putting that in the framework of understanding that every single thing that happens at the Dungeons and Dragons table is actually being processed by by the dungeon master and by all five dragon masters, and is being processed by all five dragon masters. That is being processed by intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Every single thing that happens in the D&D narrative is processed intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And today we're going to talk about processing what happens at the Dungeons and Dragons table, the narrative that happens at the Dungeons and Dragons table intellectually. All right, so let's dive into this. Okay, so let's talk about processing Dungeons and Dragons intellectually. So there's a narrative that happens at the table. It's the most powerful, most valuable narrative you will ever experience in your secular life. Period. End of sentence. Nothing you ever experience in a video game, in a show, in a movie, or in a book will ever affect you the way your D&D story. They're not as valuable. They're not as powerful. They can't impact you in the same way. And the reason why is thousands of people are working on those projects, right? But it doesn't matter because it's not made for you. Nobody had you in mind when it was built, right? Whereas with Dungeons and Dragons, it is the one story created by humans that is hyper-focused on you and can be affected in a moment's notice by an eyebrow raise, and the entirety of the people at the table. Every Dragon Master, every Dungeon Master can leap to make the story what you want it to be. Nothing else. This is Gary's legacy. Nothing else has achieved this, right? So we need to process this narrative, the most important narrative, the most important secular narrative you will ever experience. We process it intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Let's talk today about the processing intellectually. So I'm gonna mention something and I'm gonna skip it, right? You process your build. Character build is extremely important to many Dragon Masters, and you will go right, go left, and you will find 20 channels that do nothing but talk about building a strong ranger build, right? And I'm dismissive of it because I don't care about it. I think it's the lowest form of Dungeons and Dragons interaction, but it's there, and it's an intellectual interaction that you intellectually interact with that aspect. And so if you want to build a powerful build, there's an intellectual puzzle there to solve, right? And actually, I don't want to be too dismissive of it, right? The reason I don't care about it and I don't talk about it here is I don't need to. It's covered in depth in 100 channels. And it's covered at a rate of about 10 times the coverage it deserves, right? So I just don't need to cover it here. But I don't want to dismiss it. It is an intellectual pursuit, and it is an intellectual interaction that people have, okay? But that's not where it stops. Okay, like let's talk about if you're playing, like I'm in chapter 3 right now of Vecna Eve of Ruin, right? And you come to a space galleon that is broken across the dead husk of a god's body, right, in the middle of the astral sea, right? And then these things start to happen. In that, one, you need to intellectually think, how can I defeat every goal in this adventure, right? By drawing out the experiences that I'm aware of. The experiences I'm aware of because I had them personally, the experiences I had because I experienced them in some other story form, or the experiences I have because somebody told me a story. It told me, not even a story, but a historical record of what happened in their lives, right? So you need to think, okay, what is existent within my brain, within my experience, to deliver solutions for this adventure, okay? Then also, okay, intellectually, when you get over these goals, right, you may have learned leadership. You may have learned how to puzzle solve. You may have learned something about language. You may have learned about seafaring. It's happening in an astral sea, but you might have learned what's a stern, what's a prow, where's starboard, where's port, right? And then you need to take that data that is just given to you in this Dungeons and Dragons adventure, and you need to intellectually process it and add it to your collection of knowledge in your own brain, right? To use in the real world. That is an intellectual processing that happens with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, we just talked about intellectual processing. No one can test this one, right? Everybody, and this is what we did wrong for 50 years. We have thought that that's where the processing of the D&D narrative stopped, right? No one can test what I said today. Everybody believes that there is intellectual processing for D&D narratives. No one even can test that, right? Where it gets sticky is where we're going next. We're going to talk next about processing things emotionally in D&D, and we're going to talk about processing narratives spiritually in Dungeons and Dragons. And that's the part we did wrong for 50 years. We stopped at the intellectual. We did not emotionally process anything in these narratives previously. In fact, we built structures to ensure that no one would process anything emotionally in D&D narrative, and we need to tear those things down now. Number one in that list is the backup character. If you ever use a backup character again, shove away from the table, leave, and go start bowling. You don't belong at the table. Anyone who uses a backup character, in my humble opinion, is ensuring that their D&D game is valueless. I'll give you a pass if you did it previously. If you keep doing it, it's on you, and you're part of the problem. You're anchoring D&D, right? And then spiritually, we're going to talk about processing what we encounter in the D&D narrative spiritually, right? Thank you for going on this journey with me. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.